I met Ravi sir about 2.5, 3 years ago when I returned from US. And then we had this idea of going into the market. So when we analyzed all that from a top-down approach, most international companies, most domestic companies, with an exception of one or two, focus exclusively on passenger car radial or truck bias radial and heavy commercial segment, because that is where all the revenue-wise, those are the most revenue-earning segments. Also, these segments are common across the world, whereas the segments that we have chosen are specific to India and few other developing or underdeveloped countries. There are companies whose R&D expenditure is more than Indian tire industry's revenue. But if you look at it more closely, 100% of it goes into these particular segments. Whereas if you actually look into the criticality of a tire, in a big trailer there are 10 tires. So even if one bursts, it is 1/10 loss. So there is almost nil risk of losing a person or risk of losing a life. Whereas a two-wheeler tire, if something were to happen, then it is very difficult to imagine what kind of consequences are there. What I was just talking about, if you actually look at the left side pyramid, this is just the Indian numbers. So most of the numbers come from 2-3-wheeler segment, whereas most of the revenue comes from the inverted pyramid on the right, that comes from the truck and bus and passenger. So the reason why most of the companies focus on those segments is because of the bulk of the revenue coming from them. Whereas if you look at the segments that we have chosen on the right pyramid, are 2-3-wheeler, LCV, much more than, just the 2-3-wheeler itself is more than 50%. So there are other category of tires where aircraft tires or smaller tires where you see on the runways, on the airports, or some off-the-road tires, where the threat of Chinese tires is minimal in this particular segment that we have chosen, whereas the other segments, there is still some threat because of the anti-dumping duty last year. Threat has reduced, but there are still tires being imported from China and sold in domestic markets. So just the sheer numbers, about 75 lakh tires in just the 2-3-wheeler segment are sold across India. And this is Atma numbers. Atma is the industry body for the tire manufacturers. So there is a lot of unorganized sector on top of it. There is about 1 crore of just 2-3-wheeler tubes that are being manufactured by the organized sector, and the unorganized sector is at least as big as the organized sector in terms of the tubes. So this is essentially the market potential that has driven us to focus on these segments. And after we started our research, there are some positive things that have happened in the industry. The GST on tubes has come down from 28% to 18%, which is reducing the margin for the unorganized sector and making them more unviable. So we see more and more demand coming in, which is already seen in the market. There is shortage of tubes. The traditional players are not willing to invest in this particular segment. Now that we have focused our energies into 5 particular segments, how do we want to differentiate ourselves from the rest of the market? So we are here for the long run. So we are not quickly, there are a lot of fly-by-night operators. We don't want to be one of them. So we are willing to wait for the customer to come back to us. So it will take a customer running of 50,000-60,000 kilometers before they realize that our tires are better than some of the competition, and they'll come back. So we are willing to be there.